I have finished The Stranger and I feel like I need to take a shower or something. Ow. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting quite fed up with this experiment. Hey, what's up? My name is Daniela and welcome to a new video. So today's video is my first ever reading experiment. So in this video I reread 3 classics that I previously really didn't like. So I read a lot of classics in high school and college, and obviously it's been a long time. And so I was curious if I would feel differently about some of them. I wasn't going to read again some things like A Passage to India and some other stuff, but I picked stuff that I thought could be redeemable in theory. So I already had a couple of books in mind, and then I was in Portugal and we went to the oldest bookstore in the world, which was very cool, but I didn't buy any books there. But my boyfriend bought a graphic novel adaptation of Brave New World, and it was pretty, and so I thought that, oh, I really want to read it. So then it clicked that it could fit into my experiment and that, you know, this is the push to finally do it. So I did it. So the first book I chose for this experiment was The Stranger by Albert Camus, which is a French novella about a guy. I should probably say that I don't actually remember much about these books. So yeah, basically I read The Stranger and thought, what was the point? Which is actually the point of the book, because the book is about how there is no point. But I felt like it was a waste of my time and I really didn't enjoy it, but a lot of people like it, and you know, it's still a classic. So I thought maybe it was a fluke, maybe I just wasn't in the right mood for it, because it's definitely a book that you should be in the right state for, probably. So yeah, I gave it another chance. The second book I read for this experiment was the aforementioned Brave New World, and there was a time in high school and maybe early college where I was really into dystopian books. So I was actually walking around and saying that 1984 is my favorite book for a few years. It's not true anymore, not that I don't think it's great, but I don't even want to reread it because I don't want to put myself through it again. But yeah, that's probably one of the best dystopian novels out there. And I also really like Anime Farm, and I also really enjoyed We by Evgeny Zamyatin. But then I read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and I was very underwhelmed. I felt like it was the weakest of the ones I read, and I just really didn't click with it. And I also didn't remember much about this one. I just remembered, you know, it was futuristic and Shakespearean and boring. But I thought that the exciting form of a graphic novel would help me enjoy it more, so yeah, you will see how that went. And then the last book I chose was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So this is probably like the most controversial one because it is so well beloved, and I just remembered really not liking it and slugging through it and not enjoying it. And this was a weird thing even to me, because when I read other things by Oscar Wilde, like his plays or his fairy tales, I really liked them, but I just really struggled with Dorian Gray. So for years since I read it, I just thought that it was not for me. But I was curious how I would like it now, if I would read it differently. So yeah, now that we know what I chose and why I chose it, let's move on to the vlog footage. Also, I will be talking spoilers in this vlog, so if you don't want to be spoiled, maybe skip it for now. You can come back later once you read the books. Hello! So I'm finally filming the first update for this vlog. I'm saying finally because before I started this experiment, I was thinking that I had to be careful because this could easily send me into a reading slump. Considering I'm not super excited to read these books and it's more of a challenge or just a fun experiment to see what I think about these books now. So of course I picked up Stranger on ebook a month ago, and then I didn't touch a book for 3 weeks. I have not made a video since, so clearly it's going great. Now I finally picked up like another book after the 3 weeks, so I guess I'm not in a reading slump, but I'm reading incredibly slowly. And yeah, I'm 45% or 34% into The Stranger, and yeah, it's just something that has been bugging me for weeks. Like But I also had a lot going on in my life, so I'm not going to blame The Stranger entirely for this reading slump and delay. It's really funny to think back on how I thought that maybe I could finish this experiment in a week. Like, oh, sweet summer child. But yeah, we are here now, and I would like to finish The Stranger today. It is not so long, and I'm not hating it. So I will have a lot of thoughts. I'm tabbing a lot of things, but at this point I think I find it a bit more interesting than I did back then, because like, yeah, there will be some like takeaways for me, or yeah, so far I don't consider it wasted time, which is good. But yeah, I want to let my thoughts marinate a little bit more. So once I finish the book, I will give you my thoughts, and then maybe I will read something on it, like if I feel like consuming some more like literally political historical context that I probably will be missing. So yeah, wish me luck that I can finish it today, and yes, I think I will update you once I'm done, unless something incredibly interesting happens in the book, which I don't think it will until the end. So okay, so I have finished The Stranger, and I feel like I need to take a shower or something. So yeah, I have quite a few thoughts. I looked up some things. Now I'm mostly feeling like resentful that it took me a month to read this novella, because I could have read it in 1 or 2 days, and now it just like dragged and became this annoying thing. So yeah, I'm a bit annoyed about that. But anyway, I realized that I didn't remember almost anything about the book. Like, the only thing I remembered was that like he went to the beach and killed someone, and also I kind of thought that that was where it ended. So I didn't remember the second part where he is in prison and he's on trial. Like, it completely slipped out of my mind that something else happened after that. So that's weird. Also, as a minor plot remark, there was this story that he found on a piece of newspaper in his prison cell that was about a Czech person who, like, as a young person, went away and he went to make some money, and then he came back to his family. He didn't disclose who he is, and they didn't recognize him. And then he disclosed that he has a lot of money, and the family murdered him in his sleep. And then when they found out who he was, they also killed themselves. So it is a story I didn't remember it was there, but I think it was like referenced in more than one book that I have read since. So it's kind of a culture thing that gets referenced in other books apparently. The main thing I noticed right away when I started reading it, and I was also tabbing a lot of the instances, was that the main character was like constantly had like sensory overload, and he was overwhelmed by sounds and the heat and like visuals, smells. He was getting dizzy and nauseous, and like he wanted to escape the situations, and that was immediately very relatable. Then I also was looking up some things, and apparently like the sun was a metaphor for the awareness of reality that pursues him, which I don't know if that's like correct, but I took it in a literal sense, and yeah, it was really relatable. Also, I immediately thought that the character sounds neurodivergent, and then I looked up some facts, and apparently the character was modeled after the author's friend, who apparently had Asperger's syndrome, probably. So yeah, for me the character read very neurodivergent, which I guess it isn't discussed a whole lot. Like, he is mostly portrayed in the like essays and reviews as like socially distant and I mean, in the book he is portrayed as inhuman. So there's a lot of nihilism, the thoughts that nothing really matters, it's not worth to live your life, and the main character, or like the story, kind of uses it as a loophole, saying that, well, all lives are meaningless, so it doesn't really matter that we are mistreating these marginalized communities. Obviously the book deals with racism quite a bit, although like not explicitly. The character who is killed is an Arab, so I don't know that much about the history circumstances, but it is set in Algeria, and Algeria was colonized by French people. Not surprisingly, the white people consider themselves as superior, and Arab characters are talked about in a dehumanizing manner. They don't really get the space to like say anything. We don't know the name of the man who was murdered. Like during the trial, they are not invited to be witnesses or anything. So yeah, we don't know anything about them, and as I will mention later, like the murder itself isn't even the most important thing during the trial. So there were definitely some absurd vibes that I definitely didn't remember, and here it was in a really dark manner. Like I used to really enjoy like absurd plays, and absurd plays tend to be inherently dark themselves, but sometimes the tone tends to be a bit more lighter than this. So the absurdness really came out during the trial, that almost had like Kafkaesque vibes, because they talked more about like the main character's personality and how he doesn't really abide by like Christian norms and society standards, and they talked about non-important things and like details about how he behaved at his mother's funeral, like the fact that he like drank coffee and smoked cigarettes like the night before. Then the prosecutor even goes as far as saying that the main character is like guilty for the next trial that is happening after that. So yeah, really absurd vibes, but that was a really enjoyable, well, that was like the most enjoyable part for me. I like courtroom drama and absurd vibes, so yeah, that was a good part of the book. Like in the first part, some of the absurdness and weirdness of the dialogues and the interactions was bugging me, but yeah, in the second part it was it was almost hilarious. I mean, it was quite ridiculous. Like some of the minor characters were turned into caricatures that just really added to the absurdity, and I don't know if it was the intent, but for me it was kind of like a comedic relief. Like this one guy who was interrogating him was like convinced that everyone has to believe in God, and if he was to doubt that, he would lose all meaning of life, and he asked the main character if like that's what he wants, and he answered, "Really, I couldn't see how my wishes came into it, and I told him as much." And then there is some like priest at the prison when he's already sentenced to death who wants to talk to him, and he wants to like convert him to Christianity like at the last moment, which is also quite ridiculous, and saying that God can help him, and that like all of the men in his position previously has like turned to God in the last days or whatever. And yeah, he just completely, I mean, he's not having it. He just says like, "Obviously," I replied, "they were at liberty to do so if they felt like it. I, however, didn't want to be helped, and I hadn't time to work up interest for something that didn't interest me." Which is just like, I cannot object. And then he continues like, "But apparently he had more to say on the subject of God. I went close up to him and made a last attempt to explain that I had very little time left and I wasn't going to waste it on God." And then there was another interesting sentence, like pretty near to the end, when like the guy kept like pestering him, and the narration goes, "I hurled insults at him. I told him not to waste his rotten prayers on me. It was better to burn than to disappear." And I was like, is that like where Neil Young got his quote from? Because a lot of people think that it was Kurt Cobain who first said like, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." It's actually a quote from a Neil Gaiman, not Neil Gaiman, from a Neil Young song. But now, did he actually get it from Albert Camus? And then he had some more interesting thoughts about like the execution itself and about like guillotine, that you have no chance of surviving it, and that like it is in your interest to want it to work smoothly. Like that was a whole like mental process. But yeah, he said, it came to this. The man under sentence was obliged to collaborate mentally. It was in his interest that all should go off without a hitch. So yeah, some pretty interesting thoughts near the end. So the book was thought-provoking, but yeah, the nature of it, the main character, all that nihilism left me feeling kind of dark, and yeah. My enjoyment was probably around 3 stars. I think it would be a bit more fun to read it in school probably, or like really discuss it on a level that I didn't, because I didn't take any French classes. I was quite glad that I reread it. It was a bit redeemed in my eyes, and yeah, I was definitely able to take more from it this time. So yeah, I don't regret it, although yeah, I'm also glad to be done with it, and I kind of want to get rid of the icky feeling. Next up, I'm going to read Brave New World. So I can say I'm especially excited to dive into this one, but I mean, it is a really pretty book. It is a graphic novel. I like the color scheme. The art might not be like my favorite style, but like perusing it, I don't hate it or anything. And yeah, it should go by quickly, and as I probably said, this is not my copy, so you know, I'm looking forward to reading it and being able to return it, because I don't like to have books or other things borrowed for too long. I don't remember much about the story. Like, I know it's dystopian and like quite futuristic, and at some point there's Shakespeare or like his books being read or something. Yeah, from like all the dystopian novels I read, like the classic ones like 1984 and We by Zemyatin, and this one, this is probably my least favorite, and the one I, well, not like I remember much about like We, but also obviously this is not the same thing as I read in school. I mean, it is adapted and it is a graphic novel, so it will be the least fair comparison, but anyway, let's give it a try. Hello! So I have finished Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, adapted and illustrated by Fred Fordham, and I didn't enjoy myself. So I didn't remember almost anything about the story except for the fact that Shakespeare is going to appear. I mean, not himself, but like his books. And the graphic novel started with a lot of info dumping that was quite confusing. Part of it might be a me problem, that I'm not super used to graphic novels and sometimes I find them a bit confusing, but other people have also been mentioning in their reviews that they found it quite confusing. So obviously it is a graphic novel and it's an adaptation of a whole novel, so not everything is going to be included, but yeah, the world building ended up being quite confusing, and we were also like jumping from a scene to scene, you know, just like mixing several scenes together. I also got confused about the characters. That might be a me problem. As for the art, I mean, I really love the cover and I love the color palette. That is really stunning. Otherwise, I liked the art style fine, and I think one of the strongest points of this graphic novel was how the atmosphere and the world was portrayed. I think that came across really nicely and quite intensely. As for the story, I was reading some Goodreads reviews and I had to agree with people who were saying that this story is dull and kind of lame, and like the dystopian books that are much better. So yeah, I stand by my original opinion that this was one of the least favorite dystopians I read, and even reading it in a beautiful, exciting format didn't change that, which really is saying something. I don't even feel like going into much of the like philosophy behind the book, because I don't know, the way it was presented, I was just bored to death by it. And also like how they just put an advanced society that, okay, it's dystopian, but I don't know, it's just very black and white, and they put it against like savages and like religious society, which is, it's just really extreme. I didn't care about any of the characters, I didn't care about the plot, the conflicts, so yeah, I just didn't enjoy this at all. But I was able to read it very quickly, which is a plus. And it is a bit hard to read this because there's the story itself, like the original story, and then there's the adaptation and the format. So maybe the adaptation is like 3 stars and the story itself and my enjoyment is probably 2 stars. I am very happy though that I'm done with it and that I can return this book to its original owner. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting quite fed up with this experiment. Like clearly I should only do reading experiments for books I'm excited about, because then reading slumps and getting fed up with things happen. Like this time with dubious results. But anyway, I still have one book I want to give a second chance to, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray. Well, I am not even sure I'm going to be able to get through it, because I think I was close to DNFing it the first time I read it, but let us try. So I'm almost 40% into Dorian Gray, so it's time for an update, and I am quite enjoying it, which is a bit surprising. So yeah, I didn't remember almost anything about the plot except for the main fact that like the picture will grow old instead of him, and like the biggest thing I remembered about the book is that it was overly descriptive and boring, and I had to slog through it, and yeah, I don't feel it that much now. There are a lot of descriptions and it is, you know, over the top and everything, but yeah, I don't mind it that much. It is not the perfect timing to read it now, because I would have appreciated something lighter and quicker, but at the same time I think that this stage of autumn is maybe the perfect time to read it. So yeah, it seems quite fitting. The characters are quite fun to read about, and I'm enjoying the, let's say, gay undertones. And yeah, me enjoying it is quite a plot twist for me. I didn't really expect it. So yeah, for now I'm quite enjoying myself, but let's see how it goes. I still have, you know, over a half to go. So I have finished The Picture of Dorian Gray, which means I'm done with this experiment. And I went to Google some stuff about it, and then I realized that I actually didn't read the whole novel, but I read a 13-chapter shortened version, but it's also the uncensored version, which yeah, there are some more explicit things, I guess. So now I don't know how I feel about it. Like I still didn't read the full novel in English, and I read the shortened version, and like one of my main complaints was that, you know, it was too descriptive. And even in this shortened version there was a chapter where literally nothing happened, and it only described how Dorian Gray got into like perfumes and other stuff, and that was quite tedious to get through, and it was still the short version. So yeah, mixed feelings, because I actually really liked it. It is now in the 4-star territory. I thought that, you know, the plot was clever and it was entertaining and the characters were quite interesting, except for like the Lord Henry or whatever his name was a bit of a caricature. Apparently Wilde said that Henry is more like how the world sees him, whereas he feels more like Basil. Putting things from Wilde's life into perspective and thinking about it in the context of the book, it makes it more sad for me. So in this shortened version, plotline with Sybil's brother was dropped, and also apparently it was more explicit in terms of homosexuality, when like Basil was talking about how he feels about Dorian and stuff like that. And I was thinking that, you know, it would be interesting to have it more explicitly said what like Dorian Gray's immoral activities were, but like obviously even as it was, even the novel version, which was less explicit in this sense, was like used in the trials against him, and like he actually ended up being in prison for being gay, which I'm sure everybody knows. But I mean, I also knew that, but you know, just reading about it and reading about the whole history right after finishing the book, yeah, kind of put things more into perspective, because like from today's point of view, we might read the book just for fun, which is fine, but yeah, there were also some historical, like real life consequences and stuff that happened. And yeah, now I'm just thinking that it was you know, a good contribution, and it's really good that it existed at that time, even though, you know, the novel version wasn't really allowed to be super explicit. So I'm really glad I reread this book. It was kind of redeemed in my eyes, even though I read the shortened version. So maybe the full version would still be too descriptive and you know, would drag a bit too much for me. Maybe I will read it one day, or you know, I might buy some pretty version. It's not like one of my favorite classics, because I mean, from the 3 books I read in this video, this one was definitely like most up my alley, I guess you can say that. Even though like it was interesting that there was some like matching elements between Dorian Gray and the stranger, like kind of randomly deciding, or like not even deciding, but like at a spur of a moment just like killing somebody. Maybe some other parallels. And from the 3 books I read, I definitely enjoyed Dorian Gray the most during this experiment, and I'm the most grateful that I read it. So yeah, we ended on a kind of a high note. But yeah, overall, I'm really glad this experiment is over, and now I can read, you know, whatever I want, kind of. So I definitely learned a lot in this experiment, both about the books I reread and about myself and about doing reading experiments. So overall, it was definitely worth it. I would just approach it a bit differently next time, if there is next time. Okay, so I'm here to wrap up the video. So as I already said, I'm really glad that I did this experiment, but yeah, the next time I would definitely approach it a bit differently and try my darnest to not go into reading slump, because that made it so much more frustrating than it needed to be. And if I was to rank the books, so the highest one would be The Picture of Dorian Gray, and then we would have The Stranger, and then Brave New World in the bottom. So Brave New World wasn't really redeemed in my eyes, but the other 2 kind of were, especially The Picture of Dorian Gray. And yeah, I'm quite happy about it, that, you know, it's a book that I can return to someday, and I just don't need to think about it anymore as a book I didn't enjoy, because I enjoyed it more the second time, which it's definitely better than rereading a book that you loved and not enjoying it so much, which happens to me more often than this one, I would say, because I don't often give chances to books I didn't like. So yeah, an interesting experiment. I hope you enjoyed. I'm not opposed to doing other reading experiments, probably not classic oriented. although who knows. But if you have any ideas about experiments that you would like to see from me, let me know in the comments. Have you read these classics and what did you think of them? Or do you have some classics that you would be interested to reread to see if you see them differently now? Leave a comment below or just leave me an emoji to let me know you were here. Like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye!